And we just had a conversation about arbitrage funds and liquid funds. And for once, we decided to talk about the product first and then talk about the reason why you need the product. But I'm hoping that that sets the context for the next part of this conversation, which has to do with building an emergency fund. And we're talking about contingency funds in general and also specifically what you need to bear in mind when it comes to health emergencies. Joining me to talk about this is Kalpesh Ashar, who's a certified financial planner. Thank you so much, Kalpesh, for taking the time. And like I said, we've set the context by talking about arbitrage funds and liquid funds. But beyond that, I want to talk about the importance of an emergency fund. Often, when I've spoken to financial planners like yourself, you've stressed that the first thing that an individual should do is to create an emergency fund. Why is this the most important thing that you will ever do in your financial planning journey?
So thanks, Alex, for having me on the show once more. And as per the typical textbook financial planning definition, creation of a contingency fund and the protection part of it has always been primary. So whenever there is a construction of a financial plan, I think contingency fund and insurance always are on priority. Now, that was always there and that will always be there to remain on priority list. But as they say, the proof of the pudding is in eating. During the pandemic period, this came to the fore. And all those people, and I can talk from personal experiences which I've had with clients that who had followed this financial planning process and more importantly had created a contingency fund for them and for whatever unfortunate situations they came across, these contingency funds which they had kept were nothing less than saviors or heroes for all of them. And with God's blessings, they came out of this turmoil which everybody was facing. So the importance of a contingency fund cannot be undermined. And to put it in plain, simple language, it is nothing but setting aside 6 to 12 months minimum of your monthly expenses in a separate instrument, which is easily liquidable and is safe. And more importantly, that investment or that amount which we set aside need not be looked at for fetching us returns or trying to get into the rat race of return on investments and all that. It is only for a rainy day which you wish would never come, and it is kept aside for that particular period. So it's a first ring fence you put around your financial profile.
A very well-known writer in the personal finance space has described it like a seat belt. So, and she was talking about the fact that she was driving one day and she had to make an emergency brake, and her daughter was sitting next to her and had the seat belt on, and she said, "Seat belt ne pakad liya," which is essentially the fact that the seat belt has prevented you from falling, and that's essentially what a contingency fund is meant for. But a couple of points, Kalpesh, here is that you say 6 to 12 months. If you're talking about an individual that is living in a metro city, this is a considerable amount of money that they need to set aside. If somebody has not started constructing a contingency fund, this seems to be a bit of a tall order. So how should somebody prioritize this? How should somebody go about constructing this?
Yeah, so that's a very practical question, Alice. So 6 to 12 months generally, is taken as a broad parameter. It is ideally a time frame where if a person gets into a difficult zone or a difficult situation, that is probably the time that he would take to tide out of this difficult situation and get back on track. So that is the comfort zone. Because if not for this contingency fund, what that person would be doing is he would be dipping into his existing investments, adding on to liabilities, taking loans to survive, to furnish his lifestyle or to meet his liabilities, and doing lots of other things which would be quite calamitous for his profile presently and for the future. So 6 to 12 months is generally kept as a broad benchmark, but there's always a start. And when a person, obviously, no one's prepared for it unless somebody professionally tells them and explains them the nuances on the and the pros for developing a contingency fund, you could always start, bit by bit into developing this corpus separately and also developing your financial profile. But this is to be done on priority. So, for example, if a person is sitting on sufficient savings bank account balance, or at a point of time he's got a bonus, or he's got some, benefits from investments, the first thing, if he is not, built up his financial profile, is to create this contingency fund. And that could make a baby step. So you could start with creating a corpus for 3 months or 6 months, and then slowly come to a certain amount, and then keep that much amount fixed. Then you don't need to keep adding onto it, because then you're not expecting returns out of it. So that bit by bit step process is required, and you're absolutely right in saying that a start needs to be made.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, the next point is the purpose for this contingency fund. I think the pandemic and what you were referring to is, or at least what I understood, was the turmoil in terms of job losses that a lot of people faced, and they were able to use this contingency fund, assuming that they had it, to give them a little breathing room in terms of managing their monthly expenses till they found another job. But separately, you would also have to account for medical emergencies, and that can be quite a toll, right? Especially if you can't afford health insurance. So, do you need to have a separate medical contingency fund, especially if you're at a certain age, or is your emergency fund or contingency fund supposed to cover both medical as well as other emergencies?
No, so I think that goes on, profile to profile. It differs. So ideally, we have an instrument called, health insurance to protect us against hospitalizations and all those things. And now we've always insisted that your health insurance should be a larger sum. So people who are still in that make-believe type of a, mindset that a 2 lakh, 3 lakh rupees health insurance is sufficient for them, I think it is absolutely a myth, and you need to have in a metro city at least 10 lakh rupees individual health insurance cover first to protect yourself in case of an hospitalization which may arise. And as your family, their age profile and all, you first take your health insurance into consideration. That is your first level of protection. Secondly, for people who are not eligible for health insurance for whatever reason, their existing health problems or their age problems, I think a separate, a corpus can be created to meet that contingency of meeting health expenses, which could be, coming up at any point of time. Again, not to, distract your normal investments, or not to take any wrong actions or to panic. Now, this could be a combination of, if you're creating a separate corpus, a contingency fund could have a combination of keeping some money aside for health purposes if you do not have a health insurance adequate, or you could have, two baskets kept separately and tagged towards it, and you highlight it in your financial plan that A is for pure contingency for a job loss or any unforeseen, expenses, or and similarly B is kept for exclusively for health. And genuinely, you pray that you don't touch that thing, because the ultimate, end effect is something which has not gone well for you in your normal life. So I think keeping these two things is primary for us. And health insurance, again, Alex, like what you said, people in the pandemic who had health insurance were thanking the stars for it. Who didn't have, again, came to, a big awakening came to them that health insurance is primary, and we've seen a complete, rush for people getting their health insurance in place, and or in fact enhancing it. So health insurance and contingency fund, I think, are that two ring fences which you need to create simultaneously, or create one, larger amount of contingency fund and keep it aside, because that, if not, nothing will give you peace of mind.
Okay. Would you say that some individuals need a larger contingency fund than others? Like, for example, those that are not earning a regular paycheck, that have irregular income, they need to have definitely about 12 months worth of expenses set aside. And the second part is, and not necessarily related, is that once you have accumulated that amount of money, like I said, it can in fact be quite a substantial sum. Is it a very, very bad idea to dip into it, to say that I need a new mobile phone, I'll replace this amount in my contingency fund in a couple of months, but I need it right now? Is that a very bad idea?
It's a brilliant question, but really a bad idea. So I would put it that way, that you need to be disciplined in understanding what you're doing when you're following the path of personal financial planning, Alex. And it's very simple, that you've tagged a particular thing for a particular event or a particular purpose, and you should not dip into it. And in fact, I will stretch this a bit further, that you're talking about dipping into it for a lifestyle, expense or something, and which is a big no. In fact, I would stretch that no a bit further as well. That right now we are facing a situation. You're absolutely right. If the corpus is unutilized, it will come in everybody's notice. The same, husband wife would say, we've kept this amount side on the side, and it's doing nothing. And right now the markets have corrected. The equity markets have corrected, and why not dip into it to buy some good equities, or get some good opportunities to enhance our investments. Please understand, the contingency fund is for a emergency event which you are not welcoming it in your life. And you need not do that, because you might buy that stock or that investment right now, which you would dip into your contingency fund. But who knows what fate has in store for you? And if that unforeseen, unfortunate event would happen, post that you're left with nothing, because their investments are stuck and your contingency fund is depleted. So please do not lose the focus of your contingency fund. And answering the first part of your question, again, you are right. There are many people, like professionals or businessmen, who would be having irregular income or volatile incomes. So they 100% require a little bit of a more comfort or a cushion to develop their contingency fund. But again, it needs to be again linked to one part of personal financial planning, which we are obviously not discussing today, is your cash flow. So how you make your cash flow and determine your expenses will determine your contingency fund. Because in a contingency fund, at least I would propagate that it takes care of your complete lifestyle expenses which you're doing right now. It would include your fixed expenses, variable expenses, it would include your liabilities, EMIs, your insurance premiums, and to the extent even your SIPs. So in case there's a lull or an unfortunate phase which you're undergoing, you are ready for it to face it for the next 6 to 12 months, whatever the period till you tide over it.
Okay, that's an important statement that you're making. So you essentially sum up all of your outflows in terms of whatever gets out of your account every month, and that is the amount per month that you have to account for in terms of expenses, and a multiple of 6 to 12 months is what you have to build. My next question, Kalpesh, has to do with segregation. Personally, I have found that if I keep a separate account that is meant only for investments and nothing else, and I don't touch that debit card, it helps me. How important is it, according to you, to have a similar approach when it comes to your contingencies? Because I know a lot of people have this approach, probably listening to this show as well, where they have liquid funds for the purpose of contingencies, and they have money that flows out of those liquid funds on an ongoing basis into SIP, or rather STPs, right? Systematic transfer plans, into the investments that they're making in various equity instruments, etc.
So again, a spot on query, Alex, which you put up. So here, for me, when you create a contingency fund, what I would generally suggest is that you keep it in liquid, investments or liquid products. So I would simply boil it down to, without making a fuss about anything, is into your savings bank account, maximum into a bank FD, which is linked to your savings bank account, or into a liquid fund in the debt-based mutual fund category. So these three things offer me a 24-hour window to get money whenever I want. And I don't have to run from pillar to post, looking at the values or looking at the liquidity options and, exit loads and all those things. So that I want to keep it crystal clear. Now, if we go one step further, and what you're saying, again, a matter of discipline, that if you keep your money in a savings bank, account, you are bound to either touch your debit card or that money line there. You would, fiddle around with it. There's no harm, absolutely, to create a certain amount and have a separate bank account or a small amount kept, the contingency fund, obviously, in a different bank account. So you know that this amount is easily accessible to me whenever I want it. Or the best part is to simply park it in liquid funds, and it's out of your sight, and you know that it's doing something outside the ambit of your day-to-day checking. Now, here again, I would call upon a fundamental mindset which people need to develop is do not look at return on investment in any of these things where you are looking at creating a contingency fund, because that will create that behavioral pattern in you that, oh, it's just giving me a 2, 3, 4% type of a return. I'm better off somewhere else, and you would then be prone to taking risks. Even you would probably want to park your money in a bank FD, which gives you higher than normal, the government banks or something like that. And then who knows what happens, at a later stage. So be very safe and conservative with your contingency fund. For the risk-taking part of it, the instruments are aplenty. Equities, direct equity, or mutual funds, equity-based mutual funds. So that's a different ballgame altogether. So don't mix both the things together and develop that thought process that my contingency fund is just for that rainy day.
All right. Kalpesh, thank you so much for joining in and for speaking about this absolutely crucial element when it comes to financial planning. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.